Hello everyone, this is part 9 of What If Naruto Had Some Help, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. When Ino got back to the shop, Miko was putting some flowers on the top shelf and Onoiki was standing nearby looking in a magazine. Ino asked, "How's it going, Dad?" Onoiki said, "Fine. You ready to take over?" Ino nods and Onoiki left as Miko climbed down. Miko asked, "So how was your day, Ino?" Ino shrugged her shoulders and said, "Could have been better if I didn't have to chase that damn cat again." Miko giggled and Ino asked, "What about you? How was your day?" Miko said, "A little tiring. I unloaded the imports already." Ino said, "I see, so what have you been up to besides working?" Miko said, "A little of this, a little of that. Mostly just working on my figure." Ino snorts and said, "Girl, you don't need to work that figure anymore because I already seen the men drooling when you walk by." Miko shuddered at that thought and Ino asked, "So what was that the other night?" Miko bit her lip as she turned around away from Ino and said, "What do you mean?" Ino saw this and asked, "I mean when you went all Amazon and then kissed me." Miko sighed and said, "I don't know, Ino. When you called me a liar, my body just acted on impulse. I'm sorry if I hurt you." Ino said, "Hurt? No. Shocked, yes. I never kissed anyone or been kissed by anyone like that. It confused me." Miko said, "I know what you mean." Ino looked at her and said, "I guess that was sort of a moment thing, huh?" Miko said, "Yeah, I usually don't do things like that." Ino nods and said, "Well, let's just act like it didn't happen until we both know what to think. Now how is your roses growing?" Miko said, "Good. They're growing faster than I thought possible." Ino said, "Yeah, flowers are like that. So let's test your knowledge. I will point to a plant in here and you tell me what it is and what it is and what it means, and if you'll get them all right then I will show you how we keep our records, and then when Dad says it's okay I will show you the register." Miko nods and the rest of the day went by with being tested on every flower in the shop, and Miko got about 80% of the names and 50% of the meanings right. The next morning Naruto got up and went to meet Ibiki. When he got to the Anbu T&I building he went to Ibiki office and Ibiki was sitting at his desk when Naruto knocked. Ibiki said, "Enter Naruto," and Naruto came in and asked, "How did you know it was me?" Ibiki said, "When anyone enters the building I am immediately notified. You were watched all the way here by Anbu." Naruto frowned and said, "I will have to get Yoshino to help me with my chakra detection better. I didn't detect anyone." Ibiki looked at him and said, "Kid, if you can get to the point where you can detect the Anbu I will teach you a jutsu." Naruto asked, "Really, which one?" Ibiki said, "I like your style, kid. Impress me and I will tell you." Naruto sighed and asked, "So what do you want me to do, Ibiki-sensei?" Ibiki said, "I was impressed with the way you handled Mizuki, but you nearly blew it a couple of times when you needed to fake the poison and creating the clones as well as ordering my Anbu. You're lucky Neko played along or I would have pulled you out of that room and threw your ass on the street. You also enraged Anko, but I heard you already got your ass handed to you by her, so I will drop that." Naruto gulped as he heard all this and Ibiki said, "Now, the key to any good interrogation is to keep the victim on edge and to make it believable. When Mizuki was taken away I had to cover for you should you ever have to interrogate him again by giving him a shot of water to make him think it was the antidote to your poison. Now for someone like Mizuki the fake poison trick will work, but if you get some more experienced prisoners they will see through that trick a mile away." Naruto asked, "So what can I do?" Ibiki said, "First, your idea to make it look like you're a doctor with the blood on the lab coat was good. I had Onoiki grab it from your place and bring it in here and it's in this scroll. You need to keep your interrogation tools with you at all times because you never know when you will need them," as he handed Naruto a scroll. Naruto frowned and Ibiki said, "Now, you have a small reputation started. The bigger it gets the more people will know of you and fear your interrogation techniques, so don't trade your technique and ruin that reputation. You are now the doctor." As your prove yourself, I will place you in the bingo book to help spread your name, but not until you can make grown men cry for their mothers. Naruto said, so what should I do? I mean, I got the doctor coat, but what about the poison or any other ideas I might use? Ibiki said, you need to play the doctor end as much as possible. You should get some scalpels to go with your needles. You need to get several real poisons and antidotes because sugar water not going to cut it very long. Naruto said, but I don't want to if I can keep from it. Ibiki said, you're right because men tell no tales and we want them singing like there's no tomorrow, but not every poison some paralyze, some make your victim feel pain, others put people to sleep. You need to learn what poisons do what so you can tell the prisoners and make them even more on edge and easier to break. Naruto nods and asked, so what else besides the scalpel things and the potions should I do? Ibiki thought and said, you need to learn the human anatomy. Learn where muscles are, bones, pressure points, organs, and everything else you can get your hands on. You could give someone a pain poison and then break while they're in pain, simply break a finger or cut a muscle, making them think that what you did is actually worse than the truth. You don't always have to beat the out of a prisoner to get him to talk. Hell, I hardly ever touch the prisoner when I do it. I use words to screw with their minds. You did a little of that with Mizuki when you mentioned his old teammate and his girlfriend, but you need to work on when to do it and when not to do it. For today I have a couple of bandits that were captured recently, but the leader got away. I am going to use the same room you did, but I want you to watch how I do it. When I am done, I got a Neko getting you some books on the subjects I mentioned earlier. Try to read them as much as you can and memorize them. You can ruin an entire interrogation with a stupid mistake by saying or pointing to your heart on your right when it is actually on your left. Naruto said, okay, I think I understand, but where can I get some poisons that you mentioned? Ibiki said, ask Anko. Shush is Konoha poison expert. Now come on, I got men to make cry. As he got up and left the room and Naruto followed. After Naruto went home that night, Naruto looked at his bookshelf and thought, tomorrow I need to do a lot of reading. The next day, since it was Naruto day off, he created 20 kijibunchen and had them each begin to read before he left his apartment. He soon made it to training area 44 and Anko, who was in a tree eating dango, asked, what are you doing here Tain? Naruto frowned and said, I came to actually train some since today's my day off. Anko asked, why here? Naruto shrugged and said, I don't really have a training ground any longer since I am apprenticing. I thought since this place was so big I could find a small place to practice. Anko thought a moment and said, not without a supervisor. This training ground is called the Forest of Death because there are more ways to in here than there are villages in Konoha. Naruto frowned and asked, so where can I train then? Anko said, you can train here but under supervision. Since I am here I will watch and I might help if you buy me lunch. Naruto thought a moment and said, can we make a stop at Red's? Anko blinked and blinked again and said, you been to Red's Tain? Naruto said, yeah, several times actually. Anko smirked and said, alright, what you working on? Naruto said, well, I wanted to work on my rose whip again. That reminds me, Ibiki said I needed to talk to you about poisons for my interrogation. Anko put her hand on her chin and said, yeah, I've been thinking about that also. Have you tried to add poison to your rose whip? Naruto said, I don't really know anything about poisons, so no. Anko said, next week I will bring a few with me to test on your rose whip to see if I can help give you a sly whip instead of a stinging whip. Now for your interrogation, what are you exactly wanting the poison to do? Naruto thought and said, pain. Ibiki sensei said there were some that caused pain without king. I think those would work best for me. Anko said, you're going to want the antidotes also, right? Naruto nods and Anko said, alright, I got 5 that I can get for you that I sometimes use on hard asses. They're not free though. It's going to cost you $1,000. Now besides your rose whip, what are you going to work on? Naruto shrugged and Anko said, hell no Tain. If you're going to train you need to use it wisely. I want you to make as many kijibunchen as you can and have them work on water walking, tree climbing and leaf balancing. I will also create a summon and have it leave a trail through the forest to the tower. I want 20 clones to follow the summon's trail to the tower and count how many doors there are. If you can tell me how many doors there are entering the tower, I will teach you a jutsu. While your clones are doing that, you will work on your whip like we did before until noon. Got it. Good. Not giving him a chance to respond, she quickly summoned a 5-foot-long snake that was a foot wide, and it entered the forest, and Naruto created the clones and thought, just go with it. Can't argue. As they practiced, Anko was watching this time herself and said, how many of those rose whips can you make SS-tain? Naruto said, as many as I have rose hips or seeds. Why? As he tried to hit the senbons between the two clones Anko created. Anko narrowed her eyes and said, create a second one and start using it with the first one in your other hand. I see you move your entire body as you're trying to hit the target with your whips, and it reminds me of my taijutsu style a little. I am not saying this will actually work, but I was thinking if you could learn to use 2 at a time, you could really do some damage if you were to use it against an enemy you can't get close to. Naruto stopped and cut a couple of rose hips from his whip and created 2 more, and Anko thought as he began again with 1 in each hand, if that is how he creates them, then it's possible for genetic poisoning, and it won't take a lifetime but only a few hours at the speed he can grow those, but he would have to become immune to the poisons or he would poison himself. As she watched as Naruto tried to naturally sway his steps to use the whip so they wouldn't hit each other, but sometimes they did and tangled up. At noon Naruto was panting and Anko said, alright SS-tain, that's enough for today. Now dispel your clones and tell me the answer to my question earlier. Naruto dispelled his clones and winced a little and said, no, I can't, they were still following your snake when I dispelled them. Anko said, well, we will have to work on your speed then also. Now let's go to Reds. Anko shushing them to Reds, and Daven saw them appear and smirked and said, oi, 7, how you doing? Both Anko and Naruto both looked confused, and Naruto looked around and Daven chuckled and said, I'm talking about you, kid. Between your luck gambling and your luck with the ladies in the back, you've been given the nickname Lucky 7. Naruto shrugged and said, people give me names every time I turn around, so how's it going, Daven? As he walked to the bar and Daven gave him a glass of water. Daven said, good, though looks like you're here for some fun with Anko on your side, as he looked at Anko who was eyeing them. Naruto said, yeah, I'm getting low on cash again, so I thought I might come try my luck here. Daven said, what, aren't the Three Stooges paying you? Naruto said, room and board mostly. I haven't been paid any cash since I first came here. Daven said, well, that's still not bad if you're doing missions. Naruto said, haven't done missions in a couple of weeks, been too busy training. Daven scrunched his nose and looked at the corner table and lowered his voice and said, actually I could use your help. I got a pair of sharks in here right now. They've been coming in for the past few days from the time I open till I close. They're starting to cost me customers and business. Think you can try your luck against them? Naruto shrugged and said in a low voice, sure. It's the least I can do for you for taking care of Nei-chan. As he got up and began walking toward the card game Naruto had saw Daven mark with his eyes. Anko walked up and said, so Daven, what's up with you allowing SS-tain in here, and why did you signal him to that table? I lost 200 against those two the other night. Daven smirked and said, sit back and watch. As he poured Anko a cup of sake and set a bottle down and said, it's on your tab. As he walked away. Naruto stood back and saw a hand finish up and saw an empty seat and said, mind if I join? The dealer looked at Naruto and said, you're always welcome, 7. A man with a scar on his face asked, who's the kid? Naruto sat down and said, the name's Naruto Uzumaki, as he pulled out $250 and said, I don't really have much time today. I got a lady I want to take back to my place over by the bar and ravish, but she wanted a drink or two before we head there, as he threw in all his cash and said, all in. The man with a pair of shades on said, she looks like Shush is a wild one in the sack, kid. She was in here the other night with a red-eyed beauty. How you bag her? Naruto smirked and said, tell you what, match me in the pot and I will invite her over if you win. The Scar Man said, but you just laid all your money in the pot. Naruto said, I always keep my lady's money separate than my regular cash. The dealer said, are we ready, gentlemen? Scar shrugged and matched Naruto, as did Shades, and the dealer passed out the cards. He scrunched his nose and said, so either of you painters? Making both men look at him. Scar asked, what do you mean, kid? Naruto said, I mean I can smell paint coming from you both, so I just asked if you're painters, as the next card was flipped by the dealer. Shades said, no, we're not. As he rubbed his hand in his hair and Naruto smirked and said, I see. Hey Davin, bring me a drink please, as he turned his hand over and said, full house. Shades sighed and said, you got lucky kid. Naruto said, yeah, let's play another hand but let's change cards. These are getting pretty used up and starting to stick together. Davin, who was overlooked at the cards, and said, yeah they are. Been using them all day, as he thought, why is the kid wanting a new deck? Is there something wrong with the cards, and if so how can he tell? As a new deck came out and they played again, Naruto won with a pair of kings and said, well that's all for me. Sire guys, as he got up taking his drink of water with him to the bar. When he got there he pocketed the money and put his arm around Anko and said in a low voice, the cards are marked with paint. I can smell the paint on the cards but it's different scents for face cards and regular, so I say it's some kind of invisible paint like I sometimes use to prank. I recognize the scent and it's on their hands. Davin frowned and said, I see, I think I know how they're doing it now, as he pulled the deck out that he switched and waved them under the bar top and said, ultraviolet, as he used the black light to check for fakes and his eyes darted to the two men. Davin said, hey Anko, you want some of that money back you lost? Help me bust these two sharks. Anko smirked and said, gladly, as they both walked toward the bar and Naruto drank some water and he watched as Davin took the shades and looked at them and said, well, looks like a painting with as much as you touched yourself men. You've been marking the cards with ultraviolet paint and using these shades to see what the cards were. As Anko grabbed Scar and Davin grabbed shades and both began to search the men and found little bottles of invisible paint on both of them. Shades hit Davin in the stomach and made a break for the door when Naruto created some kajbunshians and they cut him off long enough for Davin to get back up and grab him and said, thanks Seven, as he knocked Shades out. Anko and Davin took both men outside and Naruto thought, so they can see invisible ink with sunglasses, must remember that, and as both came back in Anko had some money in her hand and Davin said, that's 3 sharks you busted for me kid. I am sure glad you came along. Naruto said, no problem. Glad I could help. Davin said, you going to head to the back and see the ladies or you got one already? Naruto said, crazy lady here is one of my sensei. She agreed to get me some poisons and help train me today in exchange for taking her out to lunch. I didn't have much money on me so I came to win some. Anko said, you sure seem to count yourself pretty lucky kid. Davin said, he's never lost Anko at any game in here. Anko said, really? No wonder you gave him the name Lucky 7. You know people are going to start calling you Dr. Lucky 7 when they hear about you in the interrogation name as well. Davin said, the kids hear the doctor I heard so much about. Anko nods and Davin said, I see, maybe we should just call you Doc 7 then. Anko said, that's not too bad, I will tell Abiki so he can put it on his file. Well I am getting hungry, let's go eat some dango, as she grabbed Naruto and shushined away. Davin smirked and thought, Rose will be sure to spread your name around the underworld kid when she gets back. The next day when Ino walked out of the flower shop, Naruto was leaning against the wall again and he yawned and Ino smiled a small smile and said, so you're coming again today? Naruto shrugged and said, Sensei said it's good for me and not giving me a choice. As he began to walk and Ino locked the door and walked quickly to catch him. Ino said, I'm glad. It feels nice to see you. Naruto cut his eyes at her and asked, why? I thought I was an annoying idiot who always got in your way of Sasuke like I did for Sakura. Ino frowned and thought, that's odd, I haven't actually thought of Sasuke in a while, and said, people change Naruto. I've changed. Naruto sighs and said, why the hell is it so hard to try and talk to you? Ino bit her lip and said, because you're confused like me. Naruto snorts and said, that I will agree with you on. Maybe it's a blonde thing. Ino slapped his arm and said, hey, in a half scolding, half teasing voice. Naruto chuckled and said, sorry, couldn't resist. Ino asked, so how's things with you and Sakura? Naruto looked confused a moment and said, you know, I've been so busy training I really haven't had a chance to see anyone besides you, Choji, and Shikamaru. Actually I really haven't thought about Sakura in a while. Strange. Ino said, it's the same for me with Sasuke. Until a moment ago I couldn't remember the last time I thought of him. Naruto scrunched his nose and Ino asked, so how's your training going? Naruto looked around and said, alright I guess. Everyone keeps hounding on me to increase my chakra control as much as possible and I am learning a lot of things that I didn't know but I feel like I am just standing still while the world moves around me. Ino said, I wish I could say the same thing. Sensei not the most motivated person. He has us work on teamwork for about an hour and then we do missions but they're boring D-rank missions. If it wasn't for things I learned from my dad and the others I wouldn't be improving at all. Naruto bit his lip and said, you know, I noticed you don't wear weights. Sensei got me some and I can tell they have helped my strength and speed when I take them off. Maybe you should get some. Not a lot since I know you're worried about your figure but maybe a couple of extra pounds to give you a little boost. Ino smiled a little and said, you know, I think I might do that. Thanks. Naruto shrugged and said, it's the least I could do for you healing me the other day. Ino frowned and thought, at least H is talking to me a little, as she saw Naruto walk over toward Shikamaru and Choji. Ino turned and walked toward Yoshino who saw her coming and Ino said, Yoshino. I was wondering, could you help me get some weights? Yoshino said, sure but why now? You always turned them down before. Ino glanced at Naruto and said, I want to show I can get stronger also. Yoshino followed Ino's eyes and thought, this could get interesting, and said, sure. I got some of my old ones in the house I can give you before you leave today. Ino smiled and said, thank you. Shikaku walked out into the field and said, it's time to play. Naruto walked out into the field and blinked and asked, where's the flags? Shikaku said, we're not playing that game Naruto. Every week we change the games. Naruto frowned and asked, so what are we playing this week? Shikaku smirked and said, this time it's soccer. Naruto blinked and blinked again and asked, what's soccer? Everyone looked at him and Ino said, it's a game where you see the net at the end of each field. The net at that end of the field is one team, the net on the other end of the field is the other team. We have a ball that we have to get to the other net without using our hands. Naruto said, alright, I think I understand, we have to use our feet to move the ball. Shikaku said, correct. This game works on controlling our strength, speed, agility, accuracy, evasiveness, and cunning. Naruto said, I get it, so who's on whose team? Inoki said, that's the beauty of it. The captains get to pick and you and Choji are the captains. Naruto looked at Choji and said, you pick first. Choji said, Shikamaru, as Shikamaru walked over beside Choji. Naruto said, Ino, making everyone look at him and Ino walked over and asked, why me? Naruto said, last week you were able to dodge Chooser, Yoshino, and your dad. I figure if you can do that then you would be good at this game. Ino smiled a little and Choji said, Inoki. Naruto said, Yoshino. Choji said, Shikaku. Chooser said, alright son, it's on now, and he walked over by Naruto, Ino and Yoshino. Naruto saw the other three members of his team looked at him and he asked, what? Chooser said, you're the team leader. You have to make the game plan. Naruto frowned and closed his eyes and thought, Choji is strong but not fast but Shikamaru, Shikaku and Inoki are fast, as he opened his eyes and asked, are we allowed to use jutsu? Chooser said, no. Naruto nods and said, alright, Chooser, I want you to guard our goal. I know if you're like Choji then speed is not your specialty but power is. Ino, if Choji doesn't guard their goal I want you to take him. If he does you will take Shikamaru. Yoshino, I hate to say it but I think you're faster than me so I want you to take Inoki if H is not taking the goal but if he is then take Shikaku. I will take whatever one is not taken. Yoshino said, that's pretty good plan. Chooser said, I agree and you're wrong about one thing Naruto, I may be big but I have experience enough to have worked on my speed and I am even in speed as Inoki and Shikaku. Naruto said, sorry, didn't know but that extra speed will be good guarding the goal. Choji voice said, are you guys ready? Naruto said, yeah. As he looked and saw that Shikamaru was the goalie and he thought, so that means Ino got Choji and Yoshino has Inoki and I have Shikaku. Choji took center as did Ino and Choji said, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, and he kicked the ball toward Shikaku, and Naruto charged forward and blocked the kick with his body, and he winced and thought, weighted ball, and Shikaku moved around Naruto and kicked the ball to Inoki, who went to take a shot, but it was blocked by Yoshino, who kicked it to Ino, who moved it across the field and kicked it toward the goal, and Shikamaru caught it, and Naruto said, I thought you couldn't use hands. Yoshino said, only the person guarding the goal can, everyone else can't. Naruto nods and looked at Shikamaru, who took a step back, and Naruto thought, H is going to drop kick the ball. If he does that, it will go over all of our heads right toward Choji, who's near the goal. I see. As he moved to the center of the field away from Shikaku, and Shikamaru went and dropped the ball to begin to kick it, and Naruto bent down gathering chakra into his legs, and he jumped as he overloaded the chakra coming out of his feet, blasting him into the air. Shikamaru thought, troublesome, he realized my plan. As he watched Naruto began to invert where his feet would be higher than his body, as he twisted with his arms tucked across his chest, and he drew back and kicked the ball with everything he had back the way it came. Everyone was wide-eyed, and Shikamaru saw it speeding toward him, and he dodged to the right as the ball hit the ground in front of the goal and bounced in, still spinning after it hit the net for several seconds. As Naruto landed on all four, he saw everyone looking at him, and he asked, what, did I do something wrong? Shikaku said, no. It's just none of us expected something like that. Naruto frowned and said, sorry, I thought that's what we were supposed to do. Ino said, that was great, Naruto. How did you do it? Naruto blinked as he saw everyone run over toward him excited and said, I just did like I did last week and overloaded my chakra on my feet as I jumped when I expected to be blowed off, and then I just twisted. Inoki placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, good job, Naruto. Naruto smiled and thought, it feels nice to be praised for something. As they got ready to play again. After the game was over with Naruto team winning 6-5, they sat down to eat, and Shikamaru sat on his right and Choji on his left with Ino across from him. After dinner, Inoki said, okay, time for practice. Naruto, Chooser said he taught you a camping jutsu, so go ahead and create your clone army and have them work on your tree climbing except for 20, and have them work on the camping jutsu while you yourself will work on the rope escape jutsu with Shikaku. Ino, Yoshino said she would work with you on a genjutsu since you got the water walking last week pretty good. Shikamaru, you're going to work on the water walking to increase your reserves with Chooser, and Choji, you're going to work on speed by chasing me wearing your weights. Naruto looked at Shikamaru and said, water walking is hard, but not as hard as tree climbing and leaf balancing at the same time. Chooser looked at Naruto and asked, when did you learn water walking, Naruto? Naruto said, Snake Lady made me learn it when I told her what chakra exercises you have taught me. Chooser said, well, if she did, then I still want you to learn to put the leaf on different spots with the tree climbing on our days, adding more leaves each time, and do the same for water walking. Naruto said, already thought of that, sensei. I wanted to surprise you. Chooser said, that's good. Now after you can get them on your head and hands at the same time, have them on your shoulders also. Naruto said, I will, sensei, as he quickly created around 500 Kijibunshin and had all but 20 begin to work on tree climbing and leaf balancing together as Shikaku tied him up again and they started to learn the rope escape. Again, Naruto left early after a few hours. The next day was Monday, and he began to head back toward Shikaku Place when a girl with brown hair and buns walked up and asked, excuse me, but are you Naruto Uzumaki? Naruto said, yes, why? The girl said, the name's Tenten. My dad owns a weapon shop a block away called the Wolf Claw Weapon Shop. We got a custom order for you ready to be picked up. I was told to tell you the name Rose. Naruto tensed and said, all right, take me to your dad's shop. Tenten nods and began to lead Naruto to her family shop, and when they got there he saw a man behind the counter and he smiled and said, hello Naruto, the name's Dustin. Rose told me to contact you when we were done. Naruto asked, what is this about? Dustin said, lock up Tenten and come join us in the vault. As for you kid, it's your kunais. Naruto thought, the Horatian kunais, and said, all right. Dustin walked toward the back as Tenten began to lock up, and he stopped by a wall and moved a picture and cut his finger and ran the blood across a seal, and a door appeared and he opened it and went down a set of stairs, and Naruto followed. They soon came to a large underground room with weapons on the shelf, and Dustin said, Rose told me you're her apprentice. Said Shush is helping you get set up in the underground and asked me to be your weapon supplier. If I can't make it, I can get it or it don't exist. At first I wasn't going to agree because half the stuff I got down here would have me thrown in jail for the rest of my life, so I can't trust everyone, but then she showed me the Haitian kunais. I told her she had the choice to tell me exactly why you deserved them or I would kill her and you. Naruto tensed and asked, why? Dustin smirked and said, I made them for your father, kid. I have the original plates for his kunais, so it was easy to replace them. He was a friend of mine and I would rather than dishonor his memory. Naruto sighs and said, I understand. I would do the same, I think, if I was in your place. Dustin smiled as Tenten came down and said, this is my daughter Tenten. If I am not here, she is the only other person who can get down here and she will take over for me when I retire or pass on, so she will be your weapon contact in the future. I got the kunais ready, 100 of them in a pair of scrolls. If you use them or people find out about them, you are not to ever tell them about me or my daughter or anything else you get from us down here. Got it? Naruto said, I won't talk. If they ask, I will say an old friend of the Yondaime sent it to me and left town without giving me their name. Dustin said, that's good. I can see you got weights on, but they're bulky and if you get into a fight you won't be able to take them off. You interested in something a little better and can go to zero with a simple hand sign. Naruto looked at him and said, maybe, what you got? Dustin smirked and said, I got chakra bands. They look like bandages, but they do the same thing as your weights you got on now, making it feel like you got 10 extra pounds then your muscles can handle instead of the 5, and they eat a little chakra from you, making your reserves have to increase more, but with a half dragon hand sign you can drop all your weight and absorb the chakra back into your body. They were a specialty of Kumo Anbu and I got these from one when they came to sign the peace treaty back about 10 years ago, give or take a year or two, as he pulled up a pair of black bandages. Naruto blinked and asked, how much? Dustin said, 500. Naruto said, deal, as he pulled out his wallet and paid the money. Dustin said, good, Rose already paid for the kunais for you. Need anything else? Naruto thought a moment and asked, you wouldn't happen to have anything on whips, would you? Tenten asked, what do you mean? Naruto said, I picked up a whip as a weapon since it's an odd weapon and I am getting pretty good at hitting senbons out of the air with it, but I am looking for something to explain the use of a whip better to me so I can use it better. Dustin said, I don't have anything now, but I can in about a week. Naruto said, great, how much would it cost? Dustin said, agree to get all your weapons here and I will cut you a deal. Naruto said, sure, since nobody else in Konoha will let me get anything really. Tenten asked, what do you mean? I mean, I can understand with you being the Yondaime's son having to keep your family name a secret until you're stronger, but why don't people like you? Naruto frowned and glanced at Dustin, who said, people can't tell the difference between a scroll and a sealed ear. Naruto said, the kyuubi wasn't ked, it was sealed, as he crossed his arms and looked up at the ceiling. Tenten thought a moment and said, I see, damn idiots, as she looked at Naruto. Naruto blinked and looked back at her and asked, huh? Tenten said, it's sealed in you, right? Naruto nods and Tenten said, look, I deal with sealing nearly every day. I know the difference between a kunai and a scroll. Naruto smiled a small smile and thought, so they accept me as me. That's two more, and said, I will see you for all my weapon needs, Dustin. I better get going or my sensei is going to look for me. Tenten sighed and said, at least I'm off today from my insane sensei. Naruto smiled and said, thanks for the weights, I better get going. Dustin said, you want to sell your old ones? Naruto said, not yet. Sensei gave me these and I need to figure out a way to switch without him getting curious or angry, as he touched the weights on his arm. Dustin said, well, if you need anything you know where to come to. Naruto nods and leaves, and after H is gone, Tenten said, so H is the guy Rose was talking about. I understand about the fox and I understand about his dad, but he doesn't look like much himself. When you take those things from him, he can't beat Neji. Hell, I don't think he could beat Lee for that matter. H is just a rookie genin. Dustin said, just wait, dear, I am sure he will surprise you someday, dear, as he went back to work. When Naruto made it to Shikaku house, he was waiting outside and asked, what kept you, Naruto? It's already 7:30 and was supposed to meet at 6. Naruto said, sorry sensei, I had to get something that had came in I had forgotten about or it would be sent back. Shikaku looked at him and said, "Alright, but send a clone next time. I thought something might have happened to you. Now let's get started. You know the orders. I added a few new books in there also for you to use since you seem to be getting close to the end of them, and then after we finish the deal we will work on that escape jutsu until you can pull it off without trouble while your clones work on chakra control." Naruto said, "Yes, sensei," as they began. The next day Naruto went to Chusa. He had on both the chakra bands and the regular weights and worked on cooking, chakra control with the leaves on his head, shoulders, elbows, and hands while tree climbing while they worked on mastering the fire camping jutsu. On Wednesday Naruto met Anko, who smirked as she got there and said, "Alright Gaki, we are going to work on chakra control with water walking, and when you can walk on your feet without falling for an hour I want you to start walking on your hands only on the water. Now I brought a couple of books on poisons I want a couple to read while tree climbing while your clones do that. You will work on your senbon targeting." Naruto asked, "What about the poisons I paid you for?" Anko said, "Don't worry Gaki, I got them, but they will come later. Now get to work," as she created a couple of mud clones. About 6 hours later Naruto could barely move his arm and Anko jumped down and said, "Alright Gaki, grow me 2 whips and sit down." Naruto cut a couple of rose hips and grew them as he sat down, and Anko pulled out a scroll and unsealed several items, and Naruto asked, "What's with the medical supplies?" Anko said, "I need some of your blood to work on a project. From what I asked Anoiki and from what you told me, your blood is all that is really needed to grow those rose whips. I plan to try and see if I can genetically alter them by adding poisons to them, so that way when you hit someone the thorns will add the poisons to their boss and make them easier to beat." Naruto asked, "How are you going to do that?" Anko said as she hooked up an IV in both arms and handed Naruto a blood pill. Plants pass down traits from their parents like humans in a way, like eye color, hair color, and other things. I figured if I were to add a poison to a rose hip here and then add your blood, then it will grow and may have trace amounts of the poison in the rose hips I cut off of it. If I do that 100 times, then the poison should reach the level 1 want, and then I can add more poisons. That's why I need a lot of your blood." Naruto asked, "But what's to keep me from poisoning myself?" Anko smirked and said, "Good question. I am going to give you several poisons and their cures mixed together so that way you will become neutral to them. I am Konoha poison expert because I am immune to all poison in this village and then some. I plan to make you immune to them as well." Naruto frowned and said, "Great, here people tried poisoning me all my life, so I avoided hospitals when I could, and now I have a sensei who is purposely going to poison me. Ironic." Anko said, "Yeep," as she unhooked the IV and sealed the rose whips and the blood bags. Naruto asked, "So what are the poisons you plan to add to the whips, and what about my poisons for interrogations?" Anko pulled out another scroll and said, "In this scroll are 5 vials of pain poison along with everything there is to know about them, which you need to read, as well as how much to give as not to K the victims. Now as for your whips, I am going to try and add a paralyzing, pain, chakra, lethal, and sleep poison all together. If it works each time a person is hit with the whips, they will first have their chakra start shutting down where they won't be able to use it since it will be gone, which takes about 10 minutes. While that is happening, the pain poison will start spreading out and distract the enemy, where each cut and hit will feel 10 times worse than it is, which will make thinking harder. They will feel weaker as the sleep poison passes through their blood system, making them feel like the battle is going on longer than it has, and then they will feel their muscles cramping up from the paralyzing poison, making them desperate to run to try and live or try to reevaluate the battle, and by the time they realize they're poisoned it will be too late, as the lethal poisons will have had time to spread throughout their body, and running won't do anything but speed up their death, because the more they move the faster the poison spreads." Naruto thought, "So if I was able to hit a person several times with them, then all I have to do is throw some Kajbunshin at them to make them move, which will K them faster." Anko smirked and said, "Got it in one, kid." Naruto asked, "So how are you going to give me the poisons and cures to become immune?" Anko pulled out 2 kunais and said, "Why, by sparring with you with poisoned weapons." Naruto's eyes got wide as Anko cut his cheeks and he jumped back and they began to spar. Well, Anko was having fun and Naruto was trying to run for his life. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.